Demonstrators are back on the streets of Tunisia in some of the worst protests since the 2011 uprising that triggered the Arab Spring. In Kenya, internet and mobile connectivity is inspiring the nation's youth to create tech businesses. And Ethiopia's worst drought in 30 years threatens the health of nearly 500,000 children. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. A United Nations Security Council delegation is hopeful that it can bring peace to Burundi amid fears the nation might slide back into ethnic conflict. A short time ago, the group arrived in the tiny Central African nation. Violence erupted when President Pierre Nkurunziza announced his bid for a third term, which is secured in a vote in July boycotted by most opponents. The opposition says the move was illegal. UN estimates put the death toll at 439 people, but says it could be higher. More than 200,000 people have fled abroad. Speaking to the Voice of America shortly before UN Security Council delegation's departure for Burundi, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, explains the U.S. position on the proposed deployment of African Union forces, which President Nkurunziza opposes.
There's been a lot of work behind the scenes to try to urge the Burundian government to see that this is actually something that would be in the country's interest, in the interest even of the government to stabilize its own situation. So I don't think anybody has given up. That the Burundian government's first response is its only response, and I think we have a chance as a council to throw our weight behind what the AU has already put forward.
Well, some diplomats say that they are divided. Members of the Security Council are divided over how to deal with the Burundian government and how much pressure should be used. Going up north, former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak entered a second retrial Thursday over the killings of protesters during the 2011 rebellion that ended his 30-year rule. However, the Court of Appeal adjourned the trial to April 7th because of health reasons. The trial was originally scheduled to take place in November 2015, but was postponed by the Association Court and ordered to be moved from the High Court building in the center of Cairo to a more suitable location. Mubarak, 87, was originally sentenced to life in prison in 2012 for conspiring to murder 239 demonstrators, sowing chaos and creating a security vacuum during an 18-day revolt, which began in January 2011, but a retrial was ordered on appeal. Well, at least one policeman in Tunisia was killed on Thursday in the third day of rioting over jobs. These are some of the worst protests in Tunisia since the 2011 uprising that toppled autocrat Zain El Abidine Ben Ali. Tunisian police firing tear gas clashed with hundreds of protesters who tried to storm local government buildings in several towns. Several thousand people have been demonstrating outside the local government office in Kasserine, the impoverished central town where protests began this week after a young man killed himself after apparently being refused a public job. Police lobbed tear gas, protesters fired back with rocks.
We're a family of 8. My sister has a university degree and works as a street cleaner, supporting 8 people. Can you imagine?
Well, the protests have evoked memories of the suicide of a struggling young market vendor in December 2010 that became a catalyst for the Tunisian 2011 Arab Spring. Well, U.S. Vice President Joe Biden has called for a fair share of the benefits of technological advances at an annual economic forum in Switzerland. The meeting of political and economic leaders in the Alpine resort of Davos takes place amid reports of record disparity between the world's few wealthiest people and a growing number of poor and homeless. Viewers, Zlatit Sahok has more.
This participant has attracted more attention at the forum in Davos this week than any central banker or world leader. The South Korean robot called Hubo is signaling a new era of fast technological innovation that will include mobile phones implanted in the body, 3D printed organs for transplants, and clothing connected to the internet. But not everyone will be able to afford them, warned the U.S. Vice President.
will we end up creating more of a two-tiered society than exists today?
Vice President Joe Biden spoke days after Oxfam reported that the world's 62 richest people own as much wealth as half of all the world's population. Biden called for the elimination of offshore tax havens for the rich, and he urged political and business leaders to create opportunities for everyone.
When people feel that their shot at a decent life is dashed, is eliminated, the inevitable human reaction is anxiety, frustration, and anger, providing fertile terrain for reactionary politicians, demagogues peddling xenophobia, anti-immigration, nationalist, isolationist views. And it begins to shred our social fabric in each of our countries. It stirs instability.
Queen Rania of Jordan, where Syrian refugees now make up 20% of the population, says short-term solutions lead to long-term distress. She appealed to rich countries to create a special economic zone for the refugees.
Now, when you do that, not only are you giving the refugee the sense of economic self-sufficiency, which will lower the cost of hosting refugees, but you also give him skills and training that he will put to good use once he returns to his country.
One of the main challenges before the global leaders is how to end the spread of terrorism that threatens societies everywhere. Zlarica Hope, VOA News, Washington.
Well, the success of the internet and mobile connectivity in Kenya is inspiring the nation's young people to initiate tech hubs like NILAB. This is a business incubator focused on providing the right ingredients to turn business ideas into viable startups which can compete on a global scale. Africa 54's Paul Diho has our report.
NILAB is a highly creative space where young entrepreneurs meet, develop and share ideas. It's a business incubator and support center that provides innovators with the infrastructure for business growth, and where budding entrepreneurs can see their concepts take off. Sam Gichiru is the CEO, NILAB.
NILAB is a space for young innovators to come and try to see whether their ideas can become businesses. And so we play the facilitation role of trying to work with young people who are thinking in a certain way, and how can we move them from one point to the next point, and mainly focus on entrepreneurship that is heavily ICT.
NILAB was launched in 2011 with an ambitious goal of changing Kenya, one startup at a time, through an entrepreneurship program that spans 3 to 6 months.
We've helped over 40 companies. Most of those are still in business. A few have done a few successful things here and there. Have created a lot of jobs, are serving customers in the hundreds of thousands, have been able to raise money in the, almost in the millions of dollars cumulatively, and a single exit at slightly above $1 million.
Gichiru says helping emerging entrepreneurs is something that he does because he believes it will spur development.
My mind has always been, how do we change Africa? How do we change? And if you can change Nairobi, you can change Lagos, you can change Cape Town, you can change Kampala or Dar es Salaam, you can actually have impact. But how do we do it differently? How do we not follow the old traditional aid method, but how do we use aid money to create real impact? And how do we also use venture capital and angel investment money to scale scalable businesses?
Other startups are taking advantage of the office space include Kuhaso, a platform that allows skilled freelancers to find digital jobs across Africa. Billy Odero is Kuhaso's Chief Technology Officer.
I've been working on the industry for quite a while, and one thing that you realize is that a lot of people are always, coming to you and asking you, do you know someone who can do this? Do you know someone who can do this? And that's just a standard across. And one thing we realize is that there's a lot of demand for people who can do certain jobs, but people don't really know where to find them. So we figured, why not come up with a platform that can connect it.
Apps are the rage for a growing number of mobile devices, and young people are taking advantage of this revolution. Bevere Mbeki is the chief of operations at Kuhaso.
Automatically to posting a job, I'll choose the category that We are a new company. Job is a micro budget, which is in Kenyan shillings. I'll have an option to mark the job as complete, after which they will review and give feedback about the experience working with the developer.
Analysts say Kenya's IT industry has been on a major upswing in the past few years, driven largely by advances in mobile phone technology. And Kenyan officials are keen to capitalize on that technology too. 2015 was a year brimming with insightful innovations. It will be exciting to see what NILAB has to offer this year, and how high will Kenya's technology revolutions eventually reach. Reporting for VOA News from Nairobi, Kenya, I am Paul Ndiho.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Now, from Facebook and Twitter to Instagram and Snapchat, the varied world of social media makes it easier than ever for American presidential candidates to connect with voters on a personal level. VOA's Catherine Gibson looks at how social media are making the campaign, or changing the campaign conversation.
At Ted Cruz campaign headquarters, a new way to connect with voters.
Polls of everybody who scores as being likely to support Ted Cruz.
The Cruz Crew app rewards supporters with points for tweeting, Facebook following, and sharing emails. Across the 2016 campaign, the use of social media is breaking down the traditional boundaries between candidates and voters.
The Cruz Crew app allows anyone to engage. It is incredibly exciting for us to be able to take that message unfettered and unedited directly to the voters.
While the app keeps supporters engaged, the social media voice for Ted Cruz tries to win over voters on Twitter.
It's just kind of fun to see people who are an active opportunity, who might be on the fence, who could be persuaded.
The effort has paid off. The Cruz campaign leads the Republican field in website visits. Social media is a key part of every campaign strategy, as voters increasingly turn to their phones to read political news and follow campaign figures. Younger voters especially value personal connections with politicians. And the candidates understand the importance of those connections, chasing followers across the platforms.
Donald Trump has mastered tweeting. Ben Carson is a master at Facebook. Others, like Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, are using email.
Sanders supporter Ben Spielberg says the campaign focuses on people and issues usually left out of the political process. A perfect match for the open democracy of the internet.
Unlike traditional media sources, really anybody can have a voice, and if they tweet something compelling or if there's a hashtag that's trending, they can be heard.
Spielberg tweets and blogs daily to help build the discussion for Sanders.
There's tons of activity around his tweets. That stuff does permeate the mainstream media and then I think make it into the national consciousness.
And that ultimately may be the lasting impact of social media in this election. A newly engaged group of voters.
But people will still be tweeting about and holding whatever politician is elected accountable.
Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Well, coming up, a setback as Ebola makes a comeback only weeks after the virus had been declared over. Stay with us.
I'm Milar Sega. I'm the host of VOA's The Correspondents, a roundup of the world's top stories with analysis from our dedicated reporters. It's really a conversation the same way that you would bring a friend to your home and ask them what's going on. And our correspondents will do that and answer those questions through their own eyes.
That appears a false choice in more ways than one.
We can't actually put you there, but we can come pretty close. In 30 minutes, we'll show you the world.
Wherever you are, Voice of America is on air, reaching more than 130 million weekly, worldwide, in more than 40 languages. Online, social media, and breaking news from around the world. On the go, dozens of new features on popular platforms with new apps and trending topics. Voice of America. On air, online, on the go.
Well, it's time for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu with some news on stillbirths. Lino.
That's right, Vincent. But first, the World Health Organization says a second person has contracted Ebola in Sierra Leone, where an outbreak of the virus has been declared over in November. The first case was reported last week when Ebola was detected in the body of a woman who became ill and died on January 12th. WHO spokesman Tarik Jasarevic says the woman's aunt, who served as her primary caregiver during her illness, had tested positive. The aunt was being monitored and treated at a quarantine facility since she developed symptoms on Wednesday. The Ebola epidemic in West Africa also struck Liberia and Guinea, killing 11,000 people in the three countries and infecting more than 28,000. The WHO declared Liberia Ebola-free last week and gave that designation to Guinea in December. Now, medical researchers have found that nearly all of the estimated 2.6 million stillbirths around the world last year occurred in low and medium-income countries. In a series of articles published in the medical journal The Lancet, the authors found that sub-Saharan Africa has the highest rates of stillbirth in the world, as well as the slowest rates of improvement. Of 186 countries measured, Pakistan had the highest rates of stillbirth at 43 per 1,000 total birth, followed by 9 sub-Saharan African countries, including Nigeria, Somalia, Central African Republic, and Mali. Meanwhile, wealthier nations such as Iceland and Denmark have the world's lowest rates of stillbirth. The studies defined a stillbirth as an infant who has died in the womb after 28 weeks of pregnancy. Now, Ethiopia is facing its worst drought in decades. Crop production has fallen up to 90% in some regions, a consequence of an El Niño weather pattern that has caused a significant declines in rain in some parts of the world and floods in others. The Rome-based UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, says the drought has decimated Ethiopian livestock and threatened food supplies for 10.2 million people. FAO says access to pasture and water will worsen until the rainy season begins in March. The United Nations says the worst drought in 30 years in Ethiopia means 400,000 children are suffering from severe acute malnutrition and more than 10 million people need food aid. The United Nations Food Agency called on Friday for an emergency cash injection of $50 million to help the country overcome the crisis. Now joining us in the studio is Caroline Miles, President and CEO of the non-governmental organization Save the Children US. Ms. Miles, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lenore.
So you just returned from Ethiopia, where you saw firsthand the devastation on the ground. What can you tell us in terms of what is happening?
Well, I just returned a few days ago, and I'm very concerned primarily about the children and the impact on kids there. About 400,000 children are severely malnourished, and that means that those kids are very, very susceptible to the diseases that kill the most children in Ethiopia, which is pneumonia and malaria. So I did meet with many mothers and many children while I was there, and it is a very dire situation, I would say, for kids.
So where are we seeing this drought and these issues?
It's fairly widespread across the country, but particularly the Afar region, where I was, and then into the highlands in the north are some of the hardest hit areas. That's where we visited. And people now are receiving food, supplementary food there, but it's not enough food. It's maybe enough for 3 people, and their family size is 5, and they're getting food every other month, and they need food on a monthly basis. So there really is a shortage right now of very basic things, food and water.
And who are the partners that are coming together? Save the Children, of course, is on the ground. What is the role that the government is playing in this picture?
Well, I think actually in this particular crisis, the Ethiopian government has been very good. They have committed about $300 million to this response, which for the Ethiopian government is a huge amount. They really are stepping up. They are providing food. Save the Children is the largest NGO that's working in the country. We're working in 60 of the hardest hit Woredas districts in Ethiopia. But there needs to be more support from the international community. We need more organizations. We need more other governments to help with food, with money, with people.
Now, in 1984, Ethiopia went through a drought that really the international community got involved. We saw the scale in which people were really rallied behind the country. Do you think we're getting to that extent of a drought, or are we not there?
I think we could tip into that same place very shortly. If the rains, there's been 3 successive rains that have failed. If the next rains, which are due in March, if they are not strong, I think that could definitely tip the country into that same situation as 1984. But, you know, things are different this time. There is much more of an early warning system. We started kind of warning in the mid-summer that this was happening. But we can't, you know, an early warning system's no good if we don't actually listen to it. So now we really have to take action. We don't want to see children dying in massive numbers from this crisis.
So where do you see the pressing needs moving forward? What is Save the Children doing before we wrap up?
Well, Save the Children really has only 2 emergencies around the world that we would categorize what we call Category 1. One is the Syrian crisis and the millions and millions of refugees, particularly children that are both displaced inside and outside the country. And the second one is Ethiopia. So we have said this is our highest priority. We are trying to raise $100 million to respond ourselves, to respond to this crisis. We think it really threatens the progress that has been made in Ethiopia. It's one of the countries that actually made the MDG
yes, in reducing child mortality.
And they made it early, 2 years early.
Yes.
So we do not want to see the country slide back. So we're giving this a very high priority. We are already delivering food and water and livestock feed, because if people lose their livestock, that's really all the assets that they have for the future. So big response from us.
Indeed. Ms. Miles, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that was Caroline Miles. She is president and CEO of Save the Children US. Now, are you running out of cooking oil or need some dressing for your salad? Well, the solution may be crickets from your backyard. Scientists are turning insects into a source of edible and healthy oil. Jessica Berman has this report.
Even though insects are a delicacy in some parts of the world, to many people, the thought of eating them is downright disgusting.
In the Western countries, there is no culture of eating entire insects. So then the idea is to use the protein in powder as an ingredient. So then people that might tend to receive better this protein if they cannot see it. There are many uses for the oils in general, but we are investigating of the use of these oils for food. It's a food ingredient.
The Mexican researcher working in the Netherlands says insects are a great source of heart-healthy omega-3 fatty acids. Fish are the main source of omega-3 oils, but environmentalists say overfishing is depleting the oceans. Backing up the increased reliance on insects is the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. In a 2013 report, the UN agency endorsed the cultivation of bugs as a food source, saying it's environmentally friendly and could boost the world's food production. Insects require little food to grow, and experts say they yield more meat per kilogram than other protein sources. And there's no shortage of protein-rich creepy crawlies, which also contain fat, vitamins, fiber, and minerals. But not all insects produce good oil. Cockroaches don't. But researchers say different bugs provide unique tastes and textures.
This is very liquid, and it has a different color. And this is semi-solid. and it also has a more opaque color. So this can be used as a dressing, for example, and it's easy to use. And this can be used, for example, for pastry, because for pastry you need the hard fats.
The bug oils must be tested to make sure they're safe to consume, but getting over the ick factor may be a bigger challenge. I'm Jessica Berman, VOA News.
Let me just say bon appetit. And that's our Africa Health Report for today. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, I wish you the best as you eat those bugs. Thank you very much, Lenore, for joining us today. Be sure to watch for Madu every Tuesday and Thursday for the latest health news in Africa right here on Africa 54. Well, it's now time for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Whet your appetite for some artisan breads. We'll be right back.
Le bureau de l'Assemblée nationale réuni ce jour
由于近年来中国在亚丁湾地区、索马里海域。
Welcome back, and here's what's trending. Designer toast is taking menus by storm in Hollywood, appearing as appetizers and main courses. These dishes are made with gourmet ingredients placed on artisan breads. Diners can share plates of toast topped with innovative combinations of ingredients such as avocado and seaweed. Other popular combinations include chicken liver. And that's our show for today. Thank you and have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. A clam is a type of shellfish that lives in water. But what do you think this idiom means?
Clam up. Hey, how was your weekend?
It was great. I went on a nice bike ride and met friends for dinner. Oh, what beautiful weather.
And how did your date go Friday with my friend Pat?
Well...
Uh-oh. Why are you clamming up? Come on, talk.
I'm sure he's great. I just don't think we're right for each other.
To clam up means to say nothing or stop talking. This idiom compares a clam closing its shell to a person shutting his or her mouth. We use this expression to describe a person who, for whatever reason, does not want to give a response. And that's English in a Minute.